Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody, and a happy 2017.
Can only get better, right?
Presumably,
Right?
I saw something that that the Tsar of Russia he didn't tweet, but supposedly said that what was it that 1916 was such a bad year, but he knew 1917 would be better, something to that effect. So yeah, hopefully 2017 will be a good year. I'm a little concerned though. We didn't tape for a week or two over the holidays, and nobody seemed to complain or to care. So that concerns me. That people may
Well,
not
I mean, I think people were occupied. Uh,
never stopped them
uh,
before.
I'm sure there is pent up demand for our witty and insightful observations. I mean, if we held out a couple more days, I think the complaints in the complaint box would start to overflow. So I wouldn't take this personally yet.
Well, maybe we should just tempt fate or sort of test that theory and see how long. Maybe we don't publish this one, and we just see how long it goes before anybody notices or says anything.
That's just cruel. That's cruel to the fans. So don't disrespect the fans.
All right.
Don't
Well,
don't go all Mariah Carey on us now.
as I've told you before, I've gotten many times recognized and approached by people who just know me from this show, but that hasn't happened. My ego is very fragile. Didn't happen. Hasn't happened in a while. So
Well, you were away. You were away in Florida during the holidays. You
I was partying with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago.
so you might have been in an area where that's not a hotbed of DMZ fandom.
You know what? I did get recognized. Not in Boca. I was in Boca Raton, but we drove up to Delray Beach, and I got recognized from, I think, probably from CNN, but not from the DMZ. That was it, though. That was the only time, and I think it's because I was wearing this jacket. You know what I mean? Like normally when I'm hanging around at the beach, I'm incognito. I'm probably wearing a baseball cap, but I was sort of in my pundit uniform. Literally wearing this jacket because it was at night. It was a little chilly, and when I fly, I like to travel with a sports coat. I like the pockets. So I think it's like the perfect. Men don't get purses, so the sports coat is sort of your everything. But anyway, no mention of the DMZ, and that
You know, I was
concerns
I
me.
was listening to the final installment of Glenn Thrush's off-message podcast for Politico because he is now with the New York Times, and his final guest was Chuck Todd at NBC.
Yeah.
And they began talking. Chuck Todd was expressing a degree of jealousy towards Glenn Thrush because he wants to capture the kind of conversation you can have on a podcast on his TV shows, and he's frustrated that he can't do that. And Glenn Thrush has said that what he wanted to get out of the podcast was to emulate the kind of conversations he has with newsmakers as a print reporter and bring that to podcast. And he felt like he had some approximation of that. And Chuck Todd says he can't do that because there's something about being in front of a TV camera that makes everybody tighten up and not speak as informally. And so part of it is just, I think, the to tie us back to where you were talking about being recognized on CNN. They both agreed there was something about the podcast listener who, it's that kind of listener that wants more, who wants to go
Yeah.
deeper. And the TV audience is someone who kind of just wants to dip in and out and get the basics and move on. So the kind of person you're encountering in Delray is not the kind of person who's listening to this show in many cases.
Yeah. I would say a few things. One, I don't think it's a TV camera. I mean, I think it's just the way TV works. In other words, you could, and like Charlie Rose does have conversations like this, but that's not generally profitable on TV. So it's not the camera, it's just the medium does not lend itself. You could do it, and you could do it well, and it's not like people are afraid of the camera. They would get used to it, but it wouldn't be great for ratings, generally speaking. But that's okay with a podcast. Bill Simmons can have a hugely popular podcast, but he tried to replicate it on TV, and it just the economics doesn't work.
Well, Chuck mentioned that as well, that he would like to have Mike Pence on for a full hour, and he can't do it. He's basically not even allowed to do it. There's always and Thrush was kind of like, you can't force that. He was like, look, people won't watch. We have research, we have evidence that people won't stick with me. There are exceptions, like a Barack Obama or a Donald Trump, where maybe they would stick for a full hour or 30 minutes, but with most politicians, people will leave the show. And so he's boxed in by that, and which I found notable because I actually don't watch the Sunday shows regularly anymore. I don't treat them as appointment television.
Well, they're getting more and more. Sunday shows are getting more and more like every other show.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying.
And it's a lot of hurrying up and real quick, 30 seconds left, bottom line, which is, don't hate the player, hate the game, but it's not long form conversation or terribly thoughtful.
I don't doubt what Chuck Todd is saying, that he is retaining more audience than not by doing what he's doing, but I can just say anecdotally, I don't watch these shows. I used to religiously watch every Sunday show because I felt it was essential to understand what was going to happen in the week ahead. And now I feel like this is just like every other cable TV show in the 24/7 rotation. It's not essential for me to watch. I might dip in and out. I do the dishes Sunday night. I might see what I can get on through podcast platforms or YouTube or whatever, and get a little bit. But I never feel like I've missed something if I haven't watched the entire show anymore. So there's got to be other people like me out there who are like that, and maybe the folks like us go drifting into podcasts to go deeper. But there's nothing happening where every week I feel like I have to watch this or I won't know what's going on anymore.
No, I completely agree. Two other sort of related points I would make. One, I really hate to see Glenn Thrush. And I know going to the New York Times is prestigious, but honestly, he may not like me to say this, but I think the podcast is the best thing he's ever done. Like, I think it was a great podcast, and I think he was a great interviewer, and I think he's a very good reporter and a good writer. But he was a he was a great podcast host, and I hate to see him leave it behind. I understand career-wise why, and who knows, maybe he maybe it reemerges in some other form down the road. But I thought, look, there are just people who fall into a certain medium, right? So, for example, Mark Maron was a very mediocre comedian, but he's great on the podcast. He's a great podcaster and a great interviewer, and I'm not saying that Glenn was a mediocre reporter, but there are a lot of good reporters and a lot of writers. But I think he was struck lightning with that podcast, and it's a shame to see him leave it. The other thing I would say is, I think Ezra Klein has made this point, and I think it's really true, is that it used to be that if you were a blogger, and back in the days when we blogged, if you were a blogger, you could sort of try ideas out on your blog, and you sort of had permission to be wrong or to have a half-baked idea and develop, the blog would kind of be an incubator where, there'd be the wisdom of crowds, and you could use the blog to formulate ideas. Now, if you do that, you'll get crucified. You can't wing things on the blog or try things out on the blog. But you can do that for some reason on podcasts. And even here, there are things that I say that that if I say here, and I think, and part of the reason might be that it's just easier for people, maybe more people read me than listen. Maybe it's easier for people to copy and paste, on Twitter or on their own blog to attack you. But I really feel like for whatever reason, there's more grace extended to a podcaster to think out loud and to be wrong about things and to experiment that used to be allowed on blogs, and at some point it went away.
Well, the day will come when you can ruin your career on a podcast too. Don't worry.
I'm sure it's
podcasting
possible.
will get ruined.
I'm sure that's
enough.
possible. Yeah. No, I'm sure it's possible, but I think there's more like leeway and grace extended toward what you say on a podcast versus what you write on a blog. I think. I don't know if you've noticed that to be true as someone who's done it all as well.
I think any time it's a new medium and it's more experimental and the audiences are more limited and loyal, you have that kind of latitude. And once it starts to get more broadly commercialized, where every word gets scrutinized, that sense of playful freedom is going to dissipate. But something else will crop up in return, and the cycle will be never ending.
Well, maybe this is a good time for us to plug our personal podcasts, Bill. You had one called "Talk Me Down."
Right, so the strategically misguided Talk Me Down podcast during the campaign has now shifted to This Is Not Normal, which we are doing on a weekly basis. So you can get This Is Not Normal on iTunes, and I just got it on to TuneIn. I think I did at least because my marquee Christmas present outside of my usual trove of presidential books was an Amazon Echo, and Amazon Echo you can get podcasts through TuneIn. So I wanted to make sure that my podcast was available on that. So that it will be a weekly weekly medium for myself, my co-host Tracy Olson, and of course you do the Matt Lewis podcast, which is growing more and more every day.
Matt Lewis and the news, and of course people can listen to us on the DMZ on iTunes. What's this Amazon Echo, Bill? Is this where your house is like wired to the internet, like where you can like? Well, okay, you explain it to me. Obviously I don't know.
You can use it for
Amazon
that.
Echo?
The basic thing is it's a voice activated speaker, and so we have Amazon Prime, so I can say, Alexa, that's the name of the device. Alexa, play me Bruce Springsteen, and whatever Bruce Springsteen is in the Amazon Prime Music database, it will shuffle that. Or I can ask for a specific song if it's in the database. It's not as big a database.
And these aren't things that you don't own these songs. You just have a subscription to Amazon Prime, and it's like, so because of that, they're available to you.
Right. Although, having said that to you, Alexa started playing Bruce Springsteen, so I need to tell Alexa to stop. Just now. Alexa, stop. So you can take what is in your library and upload it to the Amazon cloud. So
this is like the question is the clapper, like how does it not turn itself off when the TV commercial came on? You remember that?
Right.
The clap on, clap off. I may be too old.
So I can tell it to do music. I can tell it to play radio stations. I can tell it to put things on my shopping list. I can ask it to look up things on Wikipedia. And if you had certain home devices, you could say turn the lights off, turn the dimmer down, turn on the heat. There's things that you could potentially do. And I have it in the kitchen where I'm washing my dishes, so I can. Whereas before, when I want to listen to stuff, I'd have to stop what I'm doing, dry my hands off, go to the computer.
So you hand
my
wash.
phone.
You don't have a dishwasher machine.
Oh, I do. But the big item you're doing with your hands get wet.
Okay.
Now, if I'm doing that, or if I'm cooking and I got raw meat on my hands, I can just say, change the station, and I don't have to go touch anything. So.
That's great. So here's my concern with this is because I have like a Roku and an Apple TV, and I'm sure there's a way that I could hook them both up, but I don't know how to do that, obviously. But the problem is you got to have them both because you can't watch Amazon Prime on the Apple TV; it's not compatible. You can't watch iTunes, where a lot of my shows and movies I own are, on the Roku. And I don't know at what point we're going to just figure this out. Maybe President Trump could fire off a tweet and get them in line. But I feel like the American people, we need to settle. Like you just said that you had to like download some different. You have to start using a different podcasting system because Echo probably, I'm guessing, doesn't have iTunes.
Well, Amazon has a relationship with TuneIn. It has a relationship with Spotify Premium, which I don't have. And so whatever podcaster in TuneIn are the podcasts that it can get. Although I can pair my phone through a Bluetooth to it, so if there's a podcast I can get on my phone, I can play it through the Amazon speaker. But that's a little bit more, that's a few more steps. But all these things are trying to get you to be within their corporate silo. So you get
system.
Amazon Prime because you like the fast shipping. That gives you an extra incentive to get the Echo because the Echo itself is relatively cheap. It works best with the Prime. I can say to the Amazon Echo, order me diapers, and that's it. And the diapers will come the next day through Amazon Prime. So it's all trying to get you to be within their web.
Bill, what you do in your private time is not my business. But Jeff Bezos, you brilliant son of a bitch. That's all I can say. You brilliant bastard. I read your book. So as much as I would prefer, not just enjoy, prefer to talk about diapers and podcasting, the audience is clamoring. That we haven't given them politics in weeks, and I'm sure they're dying to know where you stand on what's happening in our nation's capital right now.
Well, I want to be careful that I'm not a slave to Trump's tweeting, but I do think two of the things that he's done this week.
I do feel like you've been normalizing him for months now.
Sadly, I'm not the one who chose to do that, but he did have this. So you had this episode where the House Republicans, literally in the dead of night, gut the Independent Ethics Office to such a degree that it couldn't even report a crime to the police under the rules. And there's this immediate outcry when it happens. Trump tweets in the morning, hey, this I remember not doing it verbatim, but it essentially was, we have bigger priorities now, tax reform, Obamacare. Even though this office is unfair, this is not the best use of your time right now, which seemed to be kind of a classic playing it both ways, in my opinion. There apparently was a lot of congressional phones ringing off the hook around the same time. The House Republicans backed down and scrapped the new game plan, and immediately Trump gets the credit for tweeting Republicans into submission, but the tweets themselves were fairly limp. It was not much of a public shaming. So there's a debate going on whether Trump deserves the credit for this, or was it really the phone's ringing off the hook and Trump was scrambling to get in front of the parade without alienating his own party in the process.
Right.
So at minimum, I would say this doesn't tell us that Trump's tweets by themselves can shame Republicans into submission. It at minimum has to be paired with actual outreach from the bottom up, and whether or not you believe Trump sparked it or not is somewhat irrelevant to that question.
This could be like in the NFL where you can get like a half of the sack. You know what I mean? If you sack the quarterback, sometimes it's one guy gets it goes down in the record books, and sometimes you get credit for a half of his sack. Maybe Trump deserves that. But look, I do think this is kind of remarkable. As you know, Bill, I have been lamenting the fact that Republicans and conservatives essentially are leaderless. Like, nobody has the authority to get them in line when they do stupid things. And, whether it was John Boehner or others, it was like herding cats. And there was nobody who really, that anybody was afraid of. And I do think this is the first time in about a decade where I have seen a Republican get Republicans in line when they did something stupid, call them out, and they obliged and fixed it. So, now again, this is potentially a double-edged sword. I think Trump can use this sort of the bully pulpit of Twitter to do evil as well. But here's an example of him, getting Republicans in line, and they needed it. They needed it. They're doing stupid. That was an incredibly stupid thing for them to do, and maybe this is, like I said, the first time in a decade that anyone's been able to do that.
Well, I think certainly it's healthy for the public to know that you don't have to sit back and be docile while Republicans, burn everything to the ground. If there's something that gets you mad, if there is genuine outrage that is expressed, shame exists. Shame still exists in Trump's America. So there's a way to wield the public will, even if the Republican Party wants to do something outside of.
I mean, this only works as long as Trump is more popular than the members are. But
I think that lesson is separate from Trump.
When Ted Cruz tried to shut down the government over defunding Obamacare, it would have been interesting to see if Trump could have cut his legs out from under him, and sort of forced him to relent. I don't know.
Well, that's what I think that is unknown. I mean, what I was saying before, I think is irrelevant to Trump. If the public is outraged, the Republican Congress can be shamed. Now, whether Trump has unique power to keep Republicans in line, I don't think this is a very good test of that, because this was a one-sided fight. There was no grand constituency defending the notion that Congress should not have a fully functioning ethics process. Now, let's say Trump really forces the issue of imposing tariffs on individual companies or industries. That has a much wider constituency of opposition, namely all of corporate America, who does not want to see the precedent set that the government can dictate its business decisions, its individual business decisions, and forcibly put them in a less competitive position globally. Yeah. There's going to be some real pushback if Trump tries something like that, and there's clearly not an innate ideological appetite amongst congressional Republicans to go along. You'd only go along if you were afraid of Trump and Trump voters. Right. But there's going to be...
This time I think clearly Republicans were so stupid politically, and it's just horrible optics, horrible timing. We can differ over the merits of whether or not this should have been done, but a very stupid political move. But my concern is, sometimes politicians and Congress has to do unpopular things, and stand on principle because they're right, even though they're going to take a hit. And will President Trump, in an attempt to pander for good publicity and to be on the side of the American public, will he, in those occasions when Republicans actually ought to be taking a stand, will he turn against them publicly and throw them under the bus? That will be interesting to watch.
Well, I think this brings us to the second notable set of Trump tweets today, which is about Obamacare, where Republicans, immediately upon the new Congress being sworn in, begun the process of Obamacare repeal. Procedurally, they haven't taken the vote yet. They haven't written the particulars of the bill yet that would actually do the repeal. But it's widely known, even within Republican circles, that it's not such a simple thing to do, because you have a system that's been in place for 6 years, and if you just flip a switch and remove it, you potentially cause a lot of market chaos that is then on your watch. So everyone's trying to figure out a way to repeal and replace without putting individuals in precarious positions with their health care. So Trump does a series of tweets saying, careful, Republicans, don't do something that will make it so Democrats won't own the failure of Obamacare. Now, I don't agree with the premise that it's all a failure, but it was this cautionary note that you can't just do anything here. Make sure you're doing this in a way that doesn't make Republicans own whatever problems might come next, which is sort of inherently contradictory because Trump's pushed repeal from throughout his whole campaign. There is no magic way to avoid ownership of the healthcare system now. Republicans control all of government. Any action they take makes them responsible for what comes next. So I feel like it's almost something that hasn't been fully thought out. I mean, I don't think it's been fully thought out at any level of the Republican Party, but perhaps even less so in the mind of Donald Trump. And that to me is the political genius of Obamacare in the first place. There are people on the left that didn't like all the particulars of it, wanted a public option, wanted single payer. Obviously, the right didn't like it in any respect, even though it took elements from what Mitt Romney did and what the Heritage Foundation proposed. But just the act of doing it, just by saying, just the individual mandate in and of itself, by saying we are all, as Americans, with a few exceptions, legally obligated to have health insurance, and the government is requiring you to do this. By doing that, makes the entirety of the federal government responsible for the healthcare system. If something goes wrong in the healthcare system, people turn to government to fix it. You can't go back to a place where, so to your point, you got to stand on principle. It would be a stand on principle to say the government has no business being in the healthcare system whatsoever. It is a principled stand. I don't care what the political ramifications are. We have to extricate from the government from healthcare. Let the chips fall where they may. That would be a principled stand. That's not what's happening now. All the debate is over how do we modify the government's role in healthcare. We all accept that there's going to be one of some sort. And once Republicans enter into that reality, they own it just as much as Democrats do, if not more so at this present time. And I don't think they have fully reckoned with the practical consequences of that.
No, I think you're right. There is no way. No, look, I think what Republicans need to do and what they're doing is as Democrats continue to play the scare game, which that's clearly their strategy, to scare the American public about what's about to happen. Republicans need to remind the American public of the broken promises of Obamacare. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If you like your plan, you can keep your plan. Remind them about premiums going up. All of those things, I think, are legitimate. But I think you're right. There is no way to basically, once Republicans have to very clearly honor their promise to repeal and replace Obamacare. And once they do that, you can try to blame Obama for creating this mess, but you own at least some of it once you do that. And so it's a very it's fraught. This is fraught with danger. I think everyone realizes that the political realities are that once you give somebody an entitlement, you can't take it away, so that you can't go back. I think that in that regard, Obama did win by changing the paradigm. So now the goal is not to get rid of the government's involvement. Although the government was always involved to some degree anyway. But now the goal is going to be to make it better, more free market, more competitive, and lower cost. But you get involved in that, you start tinkering under the hood, you own the car.
Well, I think you said that Republicans have to do repeal and replace now. They don't. They have chosen to do this. They could very easily say, this has been around for 6 years. We got a lot of big things to do in America. Yeah, we'll get to that, but that's not the first order of business. The first order of business is creating jobs and cracking down on trade or whatever it is that you want to prioritize. I mean, Trump is someone who can say anything anytime. He has done 180s. He told the people, "I'm not going to lock her up," while they're chanting "lock her up," and he just does it. So it's not like he can't flip flop. He is perfectly capable of doing that. They are choosing to prioritize this despite the massive political and policy dangers that lie ahead. I would consider this, I can't fully predict what market chaos may happen. Maybe they'll get lucky. But whatever, if there is market chaos that follows, I would consider that a 100% unforced error. They have no obligation to undo this. They are choosing.
Oh, I disagree. Look, this has been not only a centerpiece and a fundamental promise and pledge of Donald Trump's candidacy, but it has been for the Republican Party for 6 years.
Well,
and so you're going to tell me, we promised if you give us the House, we'll do it. We can't do it. No, if you give us the Senate, or if you vote for Scott Brown, then we'll be able to do it. Oh, we couldn't do it. Oh yeah, but one more election. You give us the presidency, we'll do it, and they don't do it. That would be bigger than George H.W. Bush's "read my lips" broken pledge. So they have to do it.
That's their thinking. That's what they believe.
That's keeping promises and commitments. And this isn't like one of the 10 things that he promised to do. This is like the linchpin. This is a cornerstone. To mix metaphors, this is like
there are going to be hundreds of broken promises over the next 4 years. I guarantee that. This could be one of them if they chose to. You can prioritize.
But part of the problem too is this isn't just an ideological thing. Not to dismiss ideological things, but this is practical. Totally anecdotally, I can tell you my premiums have skyrocketed. It costs me a ton now for healthcare. Now, I'm sure that's going to pay for somebody else's healthcare, to redistribute my money to somebody else. One could certainly argue that that's an appropriate thing for a society to do. That's a pretty mainstream liberal argument. But I think there are a lot of Americans who voted for Trump because they're pissed off that healthcare premiums are going up. And now if Trump doesn't do that, that will have real consequences. That's not just theoretically, well, he broke a promise. No, that's the reason I voted for him. I didn't vote for him, but you know what I'm saying. For some people, that is a fundamental reason.
You could pursue smaller scale tinkering of Obamacare in discrete parts that deal with any specific problems that have arisen. Even Democrats were willing to do that. I wouldn't say any Democrat expected Obamacare to be a static thing that would never get changed. And so reform is always an ongoing process. You don't have to begin the process with a bill that says we are repealing the whole thing by a date certain, and then have to rewrite the whole thing by that date. That is not something that is politically necessary. They could have done this on a slower, more deliberate track while doing other things, because the bottom line is that Trump and the Congress will get judged on the performance of the economy writ large. I
think that's a legitimate point. I don't know why, other than just to show people that they really are going to do this, I don't know why this had to be the number one thing out of the gate, that they're the top priority, the number one priority.
I think it is why what you have said. There's this notion that they've run on this for 6 years. They've whipped the base into a frenzy. I think it is ideological in that it is blinkered them to political realities that that their side is so angry about this, regardless of the particulars, what it is they're actually angry about. They feel they have to do the whole thing in one fell swoop, and I think there are saner people that know that's not the smartest thing to do, but they feel trapped, and so they're going to do it. And it could very well. I mean, if they do this, if you do a repeal bill, it says, yeah, we'll do the specifics in 3 years from now. In the meantime, health insurers have to set their premiums year to year, and you cause premiums to spike even more. That's on you. That's not on Obama. That's not on Chuck Schumer. That's on you. I think it's a very dicey path that they're walking on.
Oh yeah, no, it is incredibly dicey. Without getting too in the weeds, because I mean I'm not a policy wonk anyway, but I do think that clearly they're going to preserve the popular parts of Obamacare, as Trump has said. I think the way so that means, for example, if people are you pre-existing conditions won't cost you health care. There are some basically Obamacare is kind of like a Rube Goldberg, and you kind of have to create a Rube Goldberg to. Some people have described it as a game of Jenga. That's the danger. But I think what you want to do is obviously you have to have healthy people signing up for health care. If you want to take care of everybody. But Republicans, I think, are very philosophically against the individual mandate. So you can do things like have tax rebates, which would incentivize people. You'd be stupid not to sign up for health care. Maybe you give the people the option, though, of getting catastrophic coverage, so with low premiums. There are things that you can do. You can have like a one-time amnesty for people with pre-existing conditions, so that people can't wait until they get sick and then sign up. That would basically force them to get in the system now, or rather force them, incentivize them. But you end up having a scenario where you're basically trying to do a lot of what Obamacare tried to do via incentives rather than mandates. And that's my guess as to how this will shake out. But the larger point I think that you've been making, Bill, is true, that once there is a paradigm shift that suggests government should be involved in healthcare, that is in a sense a win for Obama. Whether or not his exact program and Obamacare stays or not, that is a threshold issue I think that he has achieved.
Let me ask you this, though. So, I mean, the basic compact of Obamacare is we're doing things like you can stay on your parents' plans till you're 26, you can't kick someone off for pre-existing conditions, things that raise the cost of health care, or put more cost on the backs of the insurers. You pair that with the individual mandate, you are legally obligated to buy health insurance or pay a penalty, so you're putting something into the risk pool if you don't get the insurance. That was the basic deal. So costs wouldn't go out of control. Now, there's a criticism that the penalty for not buying health insurance is not stiff enough. I believe it's around $700 right now. There are people who are saying, I'd rather pay $700 and get nothing than buy health insurance, which is sort of befuddling to me. But I guess if people feel like the deductibles are too high or the premiums are too high, they'd rather just pay for nothing, which that's just the way it's happening right now. So if your logic is, well, if the I take away the mandate, I give them incentives, well, that's kind of like the same thing as you have a choice whether to pay a penalty or not, and that's not capturing everybody. So it's got to be some crazy gangbusters incentive, which costs money if you're going to not have a mandate. So my question to you is, will conservatives, Republicans, non-conservative Trump voters, will they consider Obamacare actually repealed if the individual mandate stays? Or is that the definition of repeal?
Oh, I think the individual mandate is the definition of repeal. You got to get rid of that, and I think that is unconstitutional. But having said that, otherwise, sort of putting that part aside, otherwise, I think that one of the things we learned from this election, obviously, was that people who are like really deeply committed to conservative philosophy are a very small number of people. And so I do think that it's very possible that a lot of the Obamacare provisions could stay intact, and Trump could declare victory. And if the Heritage Foundation doesn't like it, if it's not well, look, they're on board with Trump, so it's a bad example. If it's not the perfect plan that a sort of free market conservative purist would like. Let's say Philip Klein at the Washington Examiner, who does a lot of really good writing about healthcare. Like, he may not like what this is, and he may call bullshit, and he may say, like, look, this is basically Obamacare light. I don't think most Americans will care about that. Like, Philip Klein will. I don't think the vast majority of conservative Americans who voted for Donald Trump will care at all. They'll declare victory. We stopped Obamacare. But I do think that the individual mandate is it's fundamentally Obamacare. So
but
maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. But
if you remove the mandate, you remove one of the main planks of cost control, and what you replace that with is even weaker cost control, and premiums go up even more. People most certainly will care, won't they?
Well, I think that, look, again, with the caveat, I'm not an expert on this, but I think that, yes, if premiums go up, people feel that. That's an early predictor of something going awry. But I think that if you incentivize coverage via tax rebates, which means, what I mean by that is that there will be, tax deductions or incentives that you'd be crazy not to sign up for health care. And if you're not paying taxes, you get a check. You actually get money from the government. So if you're poor, you actually get money from the government if you've signed up for health care.
Well,
so it's a way of...
If you're poor right now, you get subsidies.
Right. Look, I'm saying that this is a matter... I'm making a point here that this is, in many ways, like window dressing and semantics. The other point, though, would be with the way to incentivize people getting coverage when they're healthy would be to have like a very narrow window amnesty, where yes, you cannot be denied if you have a pre-existing condition, but you have X number of days to sign up and to get on board. Otherwise, you're on your own. So it's tough. It's hard to say to somebody, well, you missed the cutoff deadline. You didn't sign up quick enough. You had your shot. Now good luck. But I mean, like, once government's involved with paying for things, then like how do you draw the line on like anything? I mean, how do you create a situation where people don't wait until they get sick to then decide to voluntarily sign up for healthcare, unless you're going to mandate coverage? So, I mean, again, this is all to illustrate the larger point that we're in this mess now. I mean, we're in this mess, and it is fraught with danger.
Perhaps we should leave it on that uplifting note.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I would recommend. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who know a lot more about this than me. Philip Klein is a good place to go. There's a lot of good, smart conservatives out there at think tanks, AEI, and other places who are writing about this. But it's going to be something to watch, and if Trump pulls it off, I mean, if Republicans pull this off, and I think they have a chance. I will say this, Bill, real quick. I take solace in the fact that they've got Tom Price, who's a doctor and the budget chairman at HHS, where he'll be helping, to find ways to implement this new law. You've got Paul Ryan as the Speaker of the House, who obviously is sort of, a policy wonk, I think very thoughtful in terms of issues like this. And you've got Mike Pence as the liaison to the White House, somebody who's friends with both of them and has experience, as a congressman and a governor. And I think they're doing a good job of communicating this. I think they are the right people. If I were putting together a team to try to make this happen, I think Price and Pence and Ryan would be that on that team. So that's one good thing that Trump has going for him. I think is that.
I disagree. I'll leave it at that.
All right. Happy New Year, Bill.
Happy New Year to you, and we'll catch you next week.
All right. Thanks.